She couldn't tell a mainspring from a balance wheel, yet her eyes knew every crack and curve of the clock on the mantelpiece. The same clock Thomas had repaired 40 years ago, the one the Polaroid had shown him grinning beside, the one she now stood before, her breath held. And in her pocket, next to the untouched estate agent's card, the old photograph felt heavier than it had any right to be. I still don't know why that one tick felt like Thomas laughing. The tool fit my hand, but it was made for his. That tick told me my experience was one thing they couldn't replace. Eleanor stood in the middle of the shop, dust motes floating through the single strip of afternoon light, and she realized she hadn't moved in almost 4 minutes. The tool was a small brass thing, a pallet fork adjuster, Thomas had called it, and it fit her palm like it was made for her, except it wasn't. It was made for his hands. His hands were gone now, buried 6 months ago, and she was still standing here holding his tool like it might tell her what to do next. The shop had been closed since the funeral. The sign on the door said "back in 15 minutes" in faded red letters. It had been 183 days. She'd counted. Because there wasn't much else to do when you were a 68-year-old widow in a 3-bedroom house in Egbert that suddenly felt too big for one person, and your daughter called every Sunday to ask if you'd made any decisions yet about selling the shop, and the answer was always no, but you didn't know why the answer was no, because you couldn't fix a single clock in here. You could barely tell the time anymore. She put the tool down on the workbench. It made a soft clink against the wooden surface, and for a second she thought she heard Thomas say something, a joke, probably, about her being a danger to horology. But the shop was silent. The clocks were all stopped. She'd wound them for the first week after he passed, because it felt wrong to let them die too. But one by one they'd wound down, and she'd let them. It was easier than pretending. This was the problem. This was the part where you're supposed to find a new normal, but the normal you had was based on a partnership of 43 years, and the other half of that partnership was gone, and nobody tells you that when you lose a husband you also lose your place in the world. You become a guest in your own life. People say, "She's the widow," like that's a job title. Like you have a name before that and a life before that and a person who knew exactly how you take your tea, and now you're just the woman who stands in a silent repair shop holding a brass tool she doesn't know how to use. Her daughter, Jessica, had been patient. For about a month. Then the call started, "Mum, you can't just sit there. The shop is an asset. You need to think about the future." Jessica worked in corporate finance in Manchester. She talked about assets and future-proofing and liquidating inventory like she was reading from a script. Eleanor didn't blame her. She'd said yes to everything, yes, call the estate agent, yes, pack up Thomas's things, yes, I'll be fine, because that was easier than saying I have no idea who I am if I'm not his wife and I don't belong anywhere and please don't make me leave the only room where I can still feel him. But she hadn't called the estate agent. She'd been coming to the shop every day for 6 months, opening the door, sitting in the chair, and doing absolutely nothing. The estate agent's card was still in her coat pocket, untouched. She told herself she was cleaning. She wasn't cleaning. And now this. She'd been going through the bottom drawer of Thomas's desk, a drawer she'd never opened because it was his, and she found the photograph. It was a Polaroid, yellowed at the edges, of a young Thomas standing next to a giant grandfather clock. He was holding a tiny brass tool in his hand, grinning like he'd just won a prize. On the back, in his handwriting, * repaired the old Elliot at St. Luke's. They said it couldn't be done. Watch what experience does. *. She laughed. It was a dry, broken sound in the empty room. Watch what experience does, she repeated aloud. Well, Thomas, my experience right now is that I don't know how to do anything except make tea and miss you. She put the photo in her pocket. Right next to the estate agent's card. The school reunion was Jessica's idea. It's your 45th reunion, Mum. You have to go. It'll be good for you. You'll see old friends. Eleanor didn't have old friends. She had acquaintances from the school gates and the church fete and the woman at the post office who always asked about Thomas. But Jessica was right in one way, Eleanor needed to get out of the shop. The shop was becoming a shrine, and she was the priestess of a religion with one believer. So she went. She put on her best dress, navy blue, the one Thomas bought her for their 40th anniversary, and she took the bus to the community center in Wavertree. The room was full of people her age, all talking too loudly, all wearing name tags with photos from 1979. Eleanor's photo showed a girl with big hair and a hopeful smile. She didn't recognize her. She stood by the tea table for an hour. She said hello to a woman named Sandra who didn't remember her. She smiled at a man named Alan who talked for 20 minutes about his hip replacement. She ate a salmon vol au vent that tasted like regret. And then she saw the clock. It was on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. A wooden schoolhouse clock, plain face, Roman numerals, probably from the 1950s. It wasn't running. The pendulum was still, the hands frozen at 9:47. Somebody had put it there as a decoration, not as a timepiece. But Eleanor stared at it, and she remembered Thomas telling her about this clock. St. Luke's, he'd said once. The old Elliot. They brought it to me in 1982. A beautiful mechanism. The whole school kept time by that clock. She walked over to it. The glass front was dusty. She reached out and touched the crack in the wood at the top corner, the same crack Thomas had shown her in the Polaroid. She took the photo out of her pocket, just to check. Yes. Same crack. Same clock. Does anybody know how to fix that? The voice came from behind her. Eleanor turned. A young woman, maybe 30, stood with a clipboard and a tired smile. Name tag, Naomi, organizer. It's been broken for years, Naomi said. We keep meaning to get someone in, but the budget's tight. And honestly, nobody cares about a school clock anymore. The head teacher wants to replace it with a digital screen. Eleanor looked at the clock again. Your head teacher is wrong, she said. The mechanism in that clock is over 60 years old. The chime sequence is unique. They don't make them like this anymore. Naomi raised an eyebrow. You know about clocks? I know about this clock. Eleanor pulled the Polaroid from her pocket. She showed it to Naomi. My husband repaired it in 1982. He was the best clockmaker in Liverpool. He said, she stopped. Her voice cracked. He said it was the most beautiful mechanism he'd ever worked on. Naomi studied the photo. Wow. That's him? Thomas. He passed away in February. I'm sorry. Naomi handed the photo back. Look, I don't suppose you know how to fix it? I know it's a long shot, but if you could just get it ticking again, it would mean a lot to the older members. They remember it from when they were pupils. Eleanor opened her mouth to say no. She didn't know how to fix it. Thomas had tried to teach her once, years ago, and she'd said, why would I need to know? You're the one who fixes things. He'd laughed and said, someday you might have to. She'd rolled her eyes. She was an idiot. But the Polaroid was in her hand. And the estate agent's card was in her pocket. And she was so tired of being the woman who couldn't do anything. I can try, she said. The next morning, Eleanor was back in the shop. She opened the book. Thomas's ledger. Handwritten, leather-bound, filled with 40 years of repairs. Every clock he'd ever touched, recorded in his neat, sloping handwriting, date, customer, problem, solution. She'd never opened it before. It felt like reading his diary. She flipped to 1982. Asterisk St. Luke's School, Wavertree. Elliot wooden case clock. Problem, worn pivots, damaged pallet fork. Solution, replaced pallet fork using custom adjuster, rebushed pivot holes, cleaned and oiled. Took 14 hours. Customer happy. Asterisk. She read the entry 3 times. Then she looked at the workbench. The pallet fork adjuster was still there, exactly where she'd left it. brass, small, with a delicate screw mechanism. She picked it up. "Watch what experience does," she whispered. She didn't know what she was doing. But she knew where to start. She went to the bus stop, took the 86 bus back to Wavertree, and asked Naomi if she could take the clock home. "I'll bring it back next week," she said. "Working or not." Naomi helped her carry it to the bus. People stared. Eleanor didn't care. The shop became a classroom. Every day for a week, Eleanor sat at the workbench with the Elliott clock in front of her. She read the ledger entry 100 times. She took the back off the clock and stared at the guts of it, wheels, springs, gears, all tangled in dust and old oil. She had no idea what she was looking at. But she had Thomas's tool. And she had his book. And she had the memory of him talking about clocks for 43 years, even when she wasn't listening. She'd absorbed more than she realized. On the third day, she figured out how to remove the pallet fork. On the fourth day, she cleaned the pivot holes with a toothpick and lighter fluid. On the fifth day, she tried to adjust the pallet fork with the brass tool, and she broke a tiny hairspring. She swore. She cried. She almost called Jessica to say, "Sell everything, I'm a fraud." But then she remembered what Thomas used to say when a repair went wrong: "Every mistake is a lesson." The clock doesn't lie. She got a new hairspring from the parts drawer. Thomas had kept everything. She installed it wrong. Then she installed it right. On the sixth day, she reassembled the movement. On the seventh day, she put the pendulum back and wound the clock. It didn't tick. She sat in the chair and stared at it. The shop was dark. It was 9:47 p.m. She was alone. The clock was silent. Her hand was aching from holding the adjuster. She had a blister on her thumb. "Okay," she said to the empty room. "What would you do, Thomas?" And then she heard his voice in her head, not a ghost, just a memory of a phrase he said 1,000 times. "If it doesn't tick, it's either the anchor or the power. Check the power first." She checked the power. The mainspring was fully wound, so that wasn't it. She checked the anchor, the escape wheel. It was caught on a tiny burr. She filed it down with a needle file, the way she'd seen him do it once, 10 years ago, when he'd let her watch. She reoiled the pivot points. She put the pendulum back. She wound it again. It was a single sound. Then silence. Then another. The whole room felt different. Eleanor put her hands on her face and didn't move for a long time. The next morning, she took the clock back to St. Luke's. Naomi met her at the door. "You fixed it?" "It's running. It might need a small adjustment in a month, but it's running." Naomi carried it inside and placed it on the mantelpiece. The second hand was moving. A few older members of the community center gathered around. One of them, a man in his 80s, teared up. "That's the clock from my school days. I used to stare at it during maths lessons." Eleanor stood back. She didn't say it was her who fixed it. She didn't need to. But word got around. The next week, a woman called the shop. "I heard you fixed St. Luke's clock. Can you look at my grandmother's mantel clock?" Eleanor said yes. A week later, a man brought in a grandfather clock his father had left him. The other repair shop said it was beyond saving. They said I should scrap it. Eleanor looked at the ledger. Thomas had repaired this exact clock in 1997. She found the entry. She opened the back. She used the brass tool. She fixed it. And then the new way failed. A young man came in, probably 25, with a tablet and a smug smile. "You know, there are YouTube tutorials for this. You don't need all that old stuff. I could show you how to fix a clock in 10 minutes. Eleanor looked at him. "Is that what you do?" "I'm a content creator. I make videos about clocks. Modern techniques. No offense, but this shop is a museum piece." She didn't get angry. She said, show me. He took out his phone, played a video. It was a 5-minute guide to replacing a quartz movement. See? Simple. No need for all those antique tools. Eleanor nodded. That works for quartz clocks. But the clock you have there, she pointed to a 1920s carriage clock on the bench, has a platform escapement. You can't replace that with a quartz movement. You'll destroy the value. He scoffed. Value is about function. Okay. She gestured to the carriage clock. Show me how to fix it with your techniques. He tried. He watched 5 more videos. He attempted to remove the platform. He cracked it. He looked pale. Eleanor took the clock from him gently. It's okay. I have the spare part. She opened a drawer. Thomas had kept 3 spare platform escapements. She installed one. She adjusted it with the brass tool. The clock started ticking. The young man stared. How did you do that? Experience, she said. And a tool my husband made in 1974. They don't sell it on Amazon. He didn't say anything for a minute. Then he said, quietly, you were right. I'm sorry. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't have to. The ticking clock said it for her. A letter arrived 2 weeks later. Handwritten, on nice paper. It was from the head teacher of St. Luke's School. It read. She put the letter in Thomas's ledger, between the pages for 1982. That evening, Jessica called. Mom, the estate agent called me. She said you've been declining her calls? I'm not selling the shop. Why not? It's just sitting there. You're not using it. I'm using it, Jess. I fixed a clock. A clock? Mom, that's lovely, but... I fixed the clock. St. Luke's. The one your dad repaired in 1982. There was a pause. Wait. You fixed it? How? Watch what experience does, Eleanor said. She smiled. She couldn't help it. Another pause. Mom, are you saying you're a clockmaker now? Maybe. I have a customer waiting list. I have a tool your dad left me that nobody else can use. And I have a ledger that tells me exactly what to do. I'm not selling. Jessica was quiet. Then she said, I'm proud of you. Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't felt in 6 months. Thank you. I'll come visit this weekend. We'll have fish and chips from Tony's. And you can show me the clock. Okay. They said goodbye. Eleanor put the phone down. The shop was quiet, but not silent. A dozen clocks were ticking now, all repaired in the last 3 weeks. They made a soft, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. She sat in Thomas's chair. She picked up the brass tool. It was warm again. Watch what experience does, she said to the room. The clocks kept ticking. And for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt like she was home. That single tick in the silent shop, would you have believed it or thought you imagined it? If this story made you ache with hope while your throat tightened, that's what the like button is for. If you're someone who holds a tool you don't know how to use but can't let go, this channel is your place.